Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Chris Thorne with HireMilitary. Glad to be back with you again, talking about opportunities for military transition, career opportunities, and really engaging that next step of your life. And so, it's always a pleasure to be able to bring on board somebody who's lived your experience and really succeeded, and now has some great story to share and great opportunity to discuss about it. And so I'm really happy to have here with me today Vishal Amin, who is a cybersecurity executive with the Enterprise Security Group of Microsoft. What an amazing company that is. And, the first time that Vishal and I connected, we had just a great, conversation to get to know each other. We actually happened to live close to each other, as we found out. And I just loved hearing his story as a naval aviator and sort of what he went through in that process all the way through to where he is now. And I tell you, I was excited. I couldn't wait to get him on here to share his story with you. So really, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for making the time to come and join us here.
Thanks, Chris. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. And, I know we're going to keep this one to our tight 30-minute here today so that we can let you get back to work afterwards. But, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. And so, you've got a fun story leading up to your transition from military career. So, we'd love to hear a bit about how you ended up in the Marine Corps, how you ended up in naval aviation, F-18, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah, I flew in F-18s for a fair portion of my career. I think, I'll keep it relatively brief. I joined the Marine Corps as a mistake. I actually went to the recruiting office to have them stop calling my home. I was so bad at standing up for what I really wanted that I'd let them convince me to enlist. And I enlisted in the Marine Corps. After a few years, I realized that's what I wanted to do. I went and finished a few years on the enlisted side, commissioned, and competed for my aviation seat in Pensacola out of the basic school. And then from there was lucky enough to select the F-18 platform, and even luckier to come over here to the West Coast and really spend the majority of my my career here in the United States, right here in San Diego, after multiple deployments and some really fun and exciting moments, and a lot of learning really in the tail end of my career. And that's really the gist of what I did and how I got in the Marine Corps. I mean, if you want to talk about how I got out, I think it was very abrupt. I was planning on staying in for another 10 years. And we could get into it a little later. My exit plan was not there. I think I started probably about 6 months prior when I found out. And it, I was part of a security compromise that affected my identity and really forced me to reshape the way I thought about digital identity, security, cybersecurity. And here we are, right? 5 years later, here in an amazing organization at Microsoft, trying to shape the way our organizations achieve their missions securely.
That's awesome. And, we won't dive too far down that security, but I mean, really that whole issue of just suddenly your life is turned over in an instant from where you thought it was going to be. So, I suppose brings up that interesting question. So if you went back, you looked at, 6 months before your transition, right? 6 months before your separation, what did you imagine? Other naval career still, or Marine Corps career, what did you see yourself? How did you perceive yourself 6 months before the transition?
Good question. And just to step back, outside of service, outside of military service, you can correlate that back to what I'm passionate about, right? A lot of us here are passionate about something, and when we leave and we transition, we're really looking, a lot of veterans that I speak to every day are looking for an X amount of paycheck to ensure they're paying the bills. They're looking for the exact area where they want to live. And then they'll do anything they can to make sure those two things are happening. And what it comes back to is if you just try to fill the hole and try to just achieve those small tangibles, many of us leave our careers after the first 2 years, and we really don't achieve what we want to, or be in the position that we want to be in. When I first wanted to transition, I felt after a very lengthy career in the service, whether it was 5 years or in my case, at 20 years, that I was best set up for a leadership role in the private sector. And I think I mischaracterized what my strengths were and what I thought leadership was. I ultimately went into a role thinking I was set up for a leadership role, not understanding that the private sector worked a lot differently than what I imagined as an active duty veteran, or as an active duty turning into the veteran space, and understanding that leadership and investing in your strengths and investing into an organization to ultimately achieve their mission, whether it's revenue growth or whether it's enabling other organizations, is a lot different than someone investing in you and saying, hey, you were in the military for 20 years. I think you could be an asset here. It takes a lot more than that. So, the 6 months prior to me leaving, I thought maybe I'd find a program. I trained myself up. I would get placed into an organization that loved veterans, and I would be good. I would be okay. And, it was quite the opposite for me.
And that's such an important point. Obviously, we all want to be part of an organization that values veterans and what that veteran background and soft skills and capabilities bring. But that is such an eye-opening change to really sort of get that understanding of what it means to plug into the commercial sector and be successful for the company so that they can then in turn be supportive to you. And so, I think there's a lot of people watching right now or who are going to view this later on who they have anxieties. I mean, massive anxieties. They're either getting ready to transition, they're in the transition, right, or they maybe have already finished. And so there's a lot of anxiety that comes, and I'm sure you experienced a lot of that. So how did you deal with that? And how would you, what would you recommend for people who are in that moment right now?
That anxiety doesn't stop, right? It's always there for me. It really tied back to how am I going to provide? What am I going to invest in? I think really, overcoming that anxiety of your transition, whether it's your first transition, your second, your third, your fourth, is really peel the onion back a little bit and understand where do you ultimately want to get to? And what is your actual value that you're adding outside of being a veteran? A lot of the anxiety comes from, hey, I have a hard skill and this is all I can do. For my pilot peers, I have a hard skill. Maybe all I can do is fly. And now we're seeing if we hang on to that hard skill, there's a lot of anxiety built around maybe COVID and what's happening to the airlines versus, hey, what else can I do? So having to peel the onion back a little bit and saying, okay, I'm good at X, Y, and Z. I can, I'm good at scaling my learning. I can ramp up into organizations quick. I'm passionate about nonprofits. I'm passionate about technology and what cloud security is doing. Outside of being a veteran, I think, this leads into something that you and I discussed later. We have other strengths that organizations are looking for. And being a veteran may not be the right fit for that organization. It may not be the differentiator. And I think once we understand what our strengths actually are, that alleviates a lot of the anxiety. But let's call a spade a spade. The anxiety will always be there, whether you're in a transitioning mode or whether you're in a role, because as veterans, we're always looking to push the envelope. We're looking to succeed. We're looking to add value right away. And I think just understanding where you can fit in best, aligned with where you want to get to, is probably the best way to alleviate some of that anxiety.
I love that. That's, that makes such a great point. And you're right. I mean, companies, as we often say, they're going to most often respect you for your service and say thank you for your service. But really, and then it turns into now, what are you going to be for the organization other than just the veteran in the organization?
I think there's a great example there. So my first organization that I went to post-military service was a global IT company. And I was able to network myself into that organization, not because I was a veteran, because of the network that I built by myself post-military. And my way isn't necessarily the best way to do it. There's 1,000 ways to do it. But within the first 2 years, I had left that first organization. I went to another organization where I invested in something I was passionate about, which was cloud security. And all this time looking to influence the way we secure workflows, help organizations achieve their greater missions and empower their employees and their customers, I realized that being a veteran was not the differentiator. I had a conversation a few months prior to me coming over to Microsoft with one of our leaders here at Microsoft. Her name's Ann Johnson. She's the corporate vice president here of cybersecurity at Microsoft. And the conversation we had was not about my tenure as a Marine Corps veteran, as my stories and my ability to persevere and my ability to learn fast. It was the diversity and of my background, of the way I thought, the way I achieved certain goals and thought out of the box. It was solving a large problem from a different angle that really sparked our conversation and helped me understand, I think I can add a lot more to the team I work with and I work alongside here at Microsoft than just being a veteran and being a leader. Leadership in the private sector is not about rank. It's not about position. Every single individual in our organization can influence something, somewhere, someone. Our mission at Microsoft is really to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more, and we believe in that. And it starts with the individual. I think that's a misconception, that I had early on in my transition in terms of leadership versus where I actually fit into the organization. I went from an individual contributor role to a high-level leadership role to, a role here at Microsoft where I work alongside, in my opinion, some of the greatest minds in terms of cloud security. And it doesn't have anything to do with me being a veteran. It has me investing in what I believe in and thinking outside of the box.
I love it. Perfect. I mean, that could almost be the wrap up for everything we've talked about, because that's really so perfect. But I'm going to keep you around a little longer, unfortunately, here, because, really talking that conversation of, okay, F-18s to cybersecurity executive, there's a pathway in between there. It's interesting. And actually, a couple of questions. Seneca Johns had shared with us in the chat. How did you go from piloting F-18s to cybersecurity? And then Melissa O'Brien had asked, what steps did you take to figure out where you fit in that next career path? So, I think that's a natural. Okay, so let's talk about that. How did you go from F-18s to cyber?
It was a hard decision to make when I transitioned. I think we tie ourselves to tangible skills. A lot of times when we work with transitioning programs, when we leave the military, or if you're a spouse or anyone in the community, you think, okay, I have a PMP, I'm a project manager. I fly F-18s, or I'm a WISO, or I'm XYZ in the military, so I obviously have to go into operations, or I have to go into finance, or I have to go into IT because I worked with switches and servers and within the data center. I think taking that step back and risking, what I thought was stability to what I was passionate about was my first step. I had to really understand, where do I see myself in 10 years? What do I want to influence? Not what am I good at, and what am I, harnessing myself as, or branding myself as here in the military. And I looked at what I was passionate about. For me, it was cybersecurity. So I looked for the programs. I went through the programs. I personally did not use any of the VetCap or any of the existing programs that are out there today, which are amazing. But I went out and found the information myself, and I invested into it. I also had to sacrifice a lot of, my stability to do that. But in the private sector, when I invested in something I was passionate about right away and stuck with it, the earlier you do that in the transition, the more momentum you'll be allowed to, or you'll be able to gain later. So I sacrificed a fair amount within my first 2 to 3 years. And once I was passionate about going to work, once I was passionate about what I did, I was able to start working with our global security leaders, in the industry, within the regions. And one of the great examples I'd like to use is most of us, think about a time when you were at your best. We talk about it at the Travis Manning Foundation a fair amount, and I do a great amount of work there. When were you at your best? What were you thinking? Who were you around? Was it when you were playing baseball in high school? Or is it when you were on the debate team? Was it when you were leading a pack? Was it collaborative in nature? And think about a time when you were at best. Now, a lot of us join the military not because of the paycheck, not because of stability, because of the adventure, because of the service.
Mhm.
And we felt like we were at our best there. Well, you have to have that same methodology when you transition. So don't think of your transition as just because I was a finance officer, just because I was a logistics um, uh, uh, airman or sailor or marine. I have to do that role. I have to have a PMP because it's the greatest chance of success I have. Think outside of the box. Be disruptive in your thought, right? And that's how I got from the cockpit into now an organization here at Microsoft where I, I I've found my niche in terms of what I get to do day in and day out, and really work with our customers in terms of cybersecurity.
That's absolutely love it. Now, you mentioned something a little bit ago, which really strikes, hits me in the heart with the positive smile, and that's you mentioned you built those networks and found that first post military job through the networks, and networks matter. Yeah, everyone should have heard me say it a million times at this point. Your network is your net worth when it comes to post
Yeah.
military careers, and so I'd love to hear from you. Just how did you build your network? How did you rely on that network? Where was the value? What would you have done better about your networking before leaving the military to set up for success?
First off, I would have started networking about 3 or 4 years out. I mean, really, I would have started networking the moment I got in, and started those connections. I think that would have been extremely helpful. Uh, I thought I started networking 6 months out, where I was connecting with military leaders, old commanding officers, other veterans that have transitioned, trying to find out what their path was moving forward. And there's a lot of individuals that are probably looking at this, at this live stream going, yeah, I connect with these clubs that are full of veterans. I'm trying to emulate and follow their path. I would challenge everyone here to take a disruptive approach to networking. Reach out to people that you don't know. Find an organization that you want to work with, but don't reach out for a job. Reach out to learn about them, learn about the organization, learn about what they do. There's an organization I first wanted to work for, and I won't name it, but I wanted to be part of the organization so bad that I reached out to over 500 individuals within that organization, 600 individuals, I feel like, within the first 3 or 4 months. And it was a full-time job while I was active duty. And this was on the tail end. And I made sure that I tried to, 9 out of 10 of them weren't veterans. So to really give them the 10 seconds on me, but learn about them. And what ended up happening was I knew more about that organization than I probably would have ever known through reading, through articulating conversations with other veterans. I learned about the ins, the outs, the finance challenges, how they looked at profit, loss, how they positioned their mission, their product. And ultimately, I was connected with someone who I kept a reoccurring conversation going with, who knew someone else in an organization that said, you think a little bit outside of the box, Vishal. Let's, there is a 10, 15 year prerequisite here, but I think we need a little bit of disruption. I think we need a little bit of investment of someone else. So let's give it a shot. And ultimately, the network was able to open the door for me. Now, it took a lot of investment in learning. I did some other programs that I wasn't placed into the tech organizations through some of these other great programs that I was a part of. But mentorship was a lot to do with how I got to where I got to. There's a gentleman named Jeff Haleman. There's a few others, Rob Fegan, the leaders over at Patriot Consulting. There's the American Corporate Partners mentors that helped a fair amount. I mean, the mentorship, the networking, being disruptive in your approach was really, I think, what opened the door. But after the door was opened, that's when those soft skills that we spoke about earlier of knowing how to ramp up fast, knowing how to learn fast, that's where we turn those soft skills that employers don't traditionally look for, to fill their requisitions. That's where I started proving, I believe, what I wanted to invest in or what I wanted to do, and ultimately catalysted my career trajectory to what I have the opportunity to be a part of now here at Microsoft.
That's outstanding. And the networking, the mentorship that you mentioned, such key factors. And I love what you said about you would have started 3 years earlier, or even at the beginning of your military career. And I think that's a point that we can't overemphasize, because oftentimes when we talk about building networks, as we transition in as veterans, we think of this bubble of other veterans in the community as the networks that we build,
Sure.
which is a great network to communicate with and to really build and get that. But 97% of the American commercial workforce are not veterans, and I just it's always that thought that if you eliminate 97% of the potential mentors and networks that can create opportunities
Right.
for you, then you're really losing out at that point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I know we have, just under 10 minutes left here. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's probably some questions around, okay, well, I would love to work for an organization like Microsoft, right? I mean, so I will tell everyone here that though Microsoft has always been on my radar, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't an easy path to get here, and it could be, right? You can have to use other things that you have in your belt to get here, or an organization similar or somewhere that you want to get to. But it was a struggle for me. I struggled transitioning, and that is normal. Struggling and learning the downfalls and the pits and being in the highs and the lows. It is normal to get to where you want to get to. And one of the things that one of my mentors, another mentor, Cindy Quintero, that I hired me in my first role. She always just said, "Hey, Vishal, it's going to take some time for you to achieve this metric." And my response always used to be, "Well, it doesn't have to," jokingly. But I believe in that. And so for everyone who's got a wall in front of you, it doesn't have to take time. Think disruptively. If you want to get into cloud security, invest your time in learning about Microsoft's cloud security, Oracle, Google. I'll be agnostic here. Uh, it, things are moving so fast in the technology space that there isn't necessarily training even to keep up with it. By the time you take the training and go to an interview, it's already moved. So start following these blogs. I mean, I know at Microsoft we have thousands and thousands of white papers and resources that you can invest in. YouTube videos, just everything that, believe it or not, they're current, and a lot of us learn that way right now. It's a very aggressive and proactive approach to learning instead of just getting a certification.
Absolutely. It's a great way to go. So, one, I'm going to apologize. I know a couple people have been commenting that it seems like we're freezing up a little bit, but we'll keep on rolling. But, one of the questions that I think a few people have been asking or commenting on, and obviously I realize you can't speak to this broadly across everyone, but maybe within your experiences, in the era that we're in COVID and veterans and transition, is there opportunity at companies right now, or are they just hiring the bare drastic minimum, or are they really, are companies really keeping that talent acquisition pipeline going for people and opportunities?
It's a really good question. It is a hard time right now for organizations in terms of hiring, but I will say when one door closes, another one opens. Due to COVID-19, for example, Microsoft saw a extreme growth in collaboration and digital meetings. I mean, in the way we communicate with our clients, we've become more productive, we've become more efficient, and we had to actually hire in certain business units within Microsoft to meet the need, right? So digital transformation is a real thing, and organizations have to meet that need. So, maybe those roles that require travel, require permanent places to stay, those might scale down. But if you look for roles that are catering to our world events and our industry, organizations still have to thrive. They still have to meet their objectives. And organizations like Microsoft continue to grow and hire during the pandemic. You just have to find the right role. Just because they say, hey, we're closed now, it doesn't necessarily mean that organizations are closed, right? It may be that certain role is close, but they may have to hire maybe another customer success manager. Maybe they have to hire another couple developers. And this is IT specific. So, I see quite the opposite. If you are looking at the tech company, there are cloud, machine learning, AI organizations globally that are hiring. And if you take the time to invest in those technologies and learn what they are, they will have conversations with you, and they will entertain, hopefully entertain a veteran hire into their organization.
Awesome. Yes, I love that. If you can be adaptive to the current environment, then the current environment will help you thrive. If you can't be adaptive, then well, you'll end up not thriving, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're running into blockers, right? If you get someone on the phone, ask them, right?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, then and if you don't get a no, then you may be just getting strung along. So if you get a no, say, okay, great. Well, where are you investing, right? You have to be courageous enough to ask that next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, keeping in respect for your time here, I know we're running short, but I wanted to make sure sort of hit at least on one other key one, and that's the sort of rewinding back now, 6 months prior to transition. I don't know about you, but when I retired, I was sure before I left that I knew everything that I needed to know.
Yeah.
I had everything wired. I was 100% positive that I was well informed on all I need to know, and I think we can all say. That hits us like a ton of bricks afterwards to find out that we don't. So what would you share as key items that you thought you knew that then were revalidated in another direction after your transition?
The first thing that comes in my mind is the definition of leadership. I thought I knew leadership. I thought I knew how I can lead teams and direct them. That was ultimately false for me. The second thing was where I wanted to invest my time and how I added value to an organization. Things aren't as tangible as you think they are. And when I go to someone and say, hey, I can do this job, there's no question as a veteran or as someone with your type of background, you can do those roles. The question is, can you sustain those roles? And are you going to stay there? Ultimately, if you're not passionate about something, you are going to leave. Within the first 2 to 4 years, you're going to leave your role. And organizations are fearful of that. So those are two things that I would go back and probably redo a little differently. But ultimately, those experiences also allowed me to thrive and really be here at Microsoft. And leadership, there's a book called Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella that is really good, and he's our leader here. And I've never seen a CEO interact with the people in the world like he does, and it's really shaped the way I thought about leadership. And then in light of the other piece I was talking about, think about what you're passionate about, and as hard as it is, invest in it. Do something once a week and invest in that passion or invest in that soft skill, and have those conversations with the employers, with the people that you're trying to gain traction in. It wasn't being a technology professional at Microsoft or before Microsoft that put me in the cybersecurity solutions group here. It was having a diverse thought, and the leadership at Microsoft recognized that, right? They didn't recognize the technology experience ultimately, or this whole thought methodology of this person has to have X certifications, this X experience. They recognize diversity and inclusion and really a disruptive thought process, and that's ultimately allowed them to be disruptive in the market. So I would have probably thought about it that way.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And, I know we're out of time, and I apologize for everyone out there. I know there's a million other questions. If it's okay with you, we'll make sure that we post you into this. And if people would like to reach out to you on LinkedIn, is that okay with you if they've got more questions or would like some more information?
Absolutely. So, I'm happy to stay a minute here after, but please reach out to me. You can post your questions. I'm happy to respond directly to you, Chris, or anyone. I am on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow anything I'm sending out or any of the content. And really, I'll leave everyone with: invest in what you believe in, and invest in a mission, and ultimately, it'll land you where you want to get to. Sometimes where you want to be at the end, it may be a harder path to get to. But if you invest in that mission, that passion, it's achievable. And and read and have a mentor. I mean, there's so much we could do there, but I'm sure we can have another session on technology enablement and pieces like that. But I wish everyone the best of luck, and thank you for having me here today.
No, thank you. We might just have to do one of those follow-up sessions because I know there's so much more we can
Anytime.
talk about. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate all you've given and all your mentorship you've given me, and I look forward to talking some more. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're here on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern to talk about opportunities for your career transition coming out of the military. And Vishal, really thank you for the time today and everything you've been doing. And I look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.